in order to understand where we are on use of coal tar sealants and control of PAHs, I'm going to have to tell you a little bit about the organization that I work for. So Alistair, could we flip to the first slide? So the organization I work for is called the DRFCW, and it is an engineering and scientific research organization made up of about 50, well, we've got about 37 municipalities. We have a number of wastewater treatment facilities, environmental organizations, and engineering companies that are members of it. We have a membership of about 57 different groups, and about 35 of those hold a MPDS permit for discharging waters. The organization was set up because there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the methodology that we were seeing from the state in trying to improve our river systems. The general feeling was that the only thing that system guaranteed was very high cost. We felt that we could come up with this a scientifically based method that would result in better and cheaper outcomes. The project area that we work in is about 360 square miles. It's very hardened watersheds. These are urban waterways. A lot of, in the summer, it's nearly all wastewater affluent. And of course, we have very high stormwater peak flows in those areas. We have a number of total maximum daily loads. These are like water budgets that were designed by the federal and state governments. They're budgets for pollutants going into the waterways. And we have those for chloride and for dissolved oxygen. And those were kind of the impetus to get this organization going. So Alistair, we go to the next slide. So one of the first things that we did was set out to create an information set on what we were facing. So we did full biological analysis looking at fish and insects, and we also looked at full spectrum water chemistry and sediment chemistry. And what you're looking at here is a map of our project area. This is the 360 square mile area, and each one of those sample points you see is where we sampled. And once again, this was funded by local government. We made a very strong argument that we could make progress environmentally, better environmental progress more cheaply if we started to own this problem in an intellectual way, if we started to understand it and work towards meeting it. And the problem that we set out to solve was aquatic life. So we're trying to improve fish and insect biodiversity in these streams and rivers. So we sampled sediment, water column chemistry, and biology at each one of these sample points. Okay, Alistair, we can flip to the next slide. And what we then did is we borrowed from research that the federal government had done on causal analysis, which is a battery of statistical tests where you take all of those factors and you try to tease out what is influencing fish and insects in your area. And this is the list of parameters that we came up with that were the items that were impinging on us meeting the aquatic life goal. And so a lot of these were physical aspects. These streams are very heavily modified. They've been turned into drainage canals, and so we had a lot of items in there, not enough sinuosity in the streams and such. We also had some chemical parameters, and notably two of those, or one of those, well, I guess it is two, were coming from stormwater sources, and that was chlorides coming from winter de-icing operations. And then the other one that came up, that didn't come out of statistical tests because we didn't run that for sediment, but was PAHs. Every sample that we took just had a very high concentration of PAHs in it. And that was something that we hadn't necessarily foreseen, and that came out as a bit of a surprise. We sampled for a subset of PAHs out of the US EPA 16, list of 16 priority pollutants. We looked at 6 of those, and they were pretty ubiquitous throughout our project area. So Alistair, we can go to the next slide. So this is a map of our project area with the sediment locations, and the reason that these are treated a little differently is we didn't do the statistical analysis for this because we didn't collect sediment at all sites. We collected it at approximately half of the sites. And then that was just a cost feature on us trying to stay within budget from the sampling. But what you're looking at here is yellow on the icon means that the site was at a threshold effect for one or more PAHs, but not at the probable effect threshold. So the difference between those two items is that threshold effect means that we're seeing pHs at concentrations where you will have impacts on aquatic life, but the probable effect threshold, which this map is set out to show, means that it is statistically likely or probable that you will have those ill effects on aquatic life. Now, if I was to do this map for the threshold effects, the whole map would just be one color. Not a very interesting map to look at. So we had to take it to the higher bar in order to show some color gradient in the icons. So the majority of our sites, in fact, were at the probable effects threshold, which meant that we're likely to be having impacts on aquatic life from PAHs at each one of those sites. This was an eye-opener for us. You know, we threw in our net pretty wide. We hear a lot of talk about metals washing into urban waterways from roads and parking areas, and that's really what we were expecting to find. In fact, metals really didn't show up in troubling levels. That I think it was 2 sites out of the 42 sample sites. pHs were across the board at high concentrations. So where did we go from there? Well, the first thing that we set out a scramble to learn more about PAHs. We carried out a literature review, and we looked at, we find that, of course, they're linked in stormwater to suspended solids. And then we stumbled upon Peter Van Meter's research about coal tar sealants. We started to look at our areas and realized that coal tar sealants were in general use, and so then we actually contacted Peter Van Meter, and he was kind enough to become a guest speaker. We have regular technical conferences during the year. We six a year that all our members attend, and Peter spoke at that. He was followed up by a couple of other speakers, Alison Watts from New Hampshire and Judy Crane from Minnesota spoke. And this was very pertinent, the very pertinent issue for us, because we're facing a lot of expenditure on stormwater controls and trying to clean up pollutants after they've been released. So our members, which are village engineers, public works departments, were very interested to hear that there was a cost-effective way to reduce pollutants at the source as opposed to trying to clean them up afterwards. So what we did when this was well received by our membership was that we created a memorandum of understanding between the organization and the members, which are these public works departments for the most part, and where they would take a voluntary step of banning the use by themselves or their subcontractors for coal tar sealants within public projects within their municipal area. We have approximately 37 groups that would be, where I would say eligible, but where you would have an impact from that. In other words, that they have a significant amount of paved area. To date, 12 have signed it. We just had a meeting yesterday, and there's a further 4 that have it up for to their elected officials for conversation and to get that agreement in place. But critically, we actually got the DuPage County actually were the first group to sign it, and the county chairman actually had a signing ceremony for signing that. He was pushing forward that this was a cost-effective way to control pollution. We had done a lot of cost-benefit analysis showing that there were additional products out there, such as the asphalt sealants or the acrylic sealants, that you could use in a life cycle cost manner that would make their cost over their life cycle relatively the same as the coal tar sealants. We're also taking a further step at this point now. The idea here was that we create a ratcheting effect where our members reviewed it and then did a public works ban. We would then look at trying to get local government the authority to ban the sealing use within their municipal or county area. DuPage County and the municipalities, for the most part, in this area are not what we call home rule. They don't have the authority to ban this kind of product. So what we're looking for at the moment is approaching the state of Illinois to get them that authority so they can take the voluntary step to take this a step further and ban the sealing use within their municipal boundaries. The other thing that we're now pushing towards is try to get all our members to sign that MOU, and then we're also looking at expanding it out to other units of government, be they colleges, schools, division of schools, etc. The other thing that we're thinking, heavily about now, Alistair and I have discussed this, is we run a series of workshops on chloride reduction every year, and they've been very successful. We get about 150 people turning out to those workshops, and we're thinking about duplicating that for coal tar sealant application. In other words, that we would look at the application of asphalt sealants, and there's different methods of applying those, and that's something if we're looking at banning this locally, we want to make sure that local contractors can at least get to see what the alternatives like, how it works, and what the different application methods would be. We're also looking at developing perhaps parking lot material. We have material supplied to us by the College of New Hampshire from Alison Watts, which is, and I'd recommend anyone who's looking for literature in that to go to their website, and you can get a brochure on coal tar sealants, what the impacts on the environment are and what the alternatives are. It's a good item you can download and use. Our public works departments are all have that in their handouts for local citizens. So the next step then would be to see if we can put those trainings together. And I guess that's the end of my presentation.
So one question here for Stephen McCracken. Are you aware that the state's attorney for McHenry County has recently ruled that home rule is not necessary for Illinois communities if there's a human health element?
Okay, so I guess I was aware of that. One of the arguments that we have seen when we've engaged at further up the state level on this is that the human health aspects of coal tar sealants have not been as fully explored as the aquatic life impacts. So we've had some pushback on using those arguments, and and once again, that's not my area of expertise. So I bring it up as an item of additional research. But yeah, I wasn't fully familiar with that argument, so I will look into that and see if that's something that we can use. So that was Kane County, correct?
McHenry.
McHenry County. Okay. And I'm in touch with the folks out there. I do quite a bit of work with them.
Doing local testing would be time-consuming and expensive. It seems that the testing that has been done should be convincing that the problem is widespread. Do we feel more local testing is still necessary?
Yeah, that's kind of my opinion. I just want to be clear, the testing we did, we were not looking for coal tar sealants or PAHs in particular. What we were doing was trying to create a database of possible impairments to aquatic life, and that's just was a huge red flag when we found those concentrations. But in terms of doing additional testing of the impacts of, in urban areas, if coal tar sealants are a large source of PAHs, we're not planning to do any of that kind of research. For us, the research that has been done is adequate. If we know we are using substantial amounts of coal tar in this area, just a survey of our members, and then a survey of, local contractors have shown us that. But even if we weren't using them, to me, we would still move forward with some kind of pledge not to use them simply because we wouldn't want to start using them. So in terms of research about where the sources are and what the impacts are, I think that from our point of view, we're happy with the research to date.
Using public funds to discourage the use of a product and hurting small business, is that a wise use of those funds? We'll go back to the pollution prevention approach. The focus is on reducing hazard to workers, communities, customers, children, vulnerable populations, reducing costs. That, yes, involves moving from choosing one product over another. And in a voluntary setting, the decision-making is always with the user, the purchaser. And so we promote this and have been for 25 years, and we get reductions in environmental loadings and releases to the air, water, to waste. And that is a public policy goal that was established in 1990 in Minnesota, and really nationwide through the U.S. Pollution Prevention Act. So this is not an active question. It's been long answered.
Just speaking for our membership, we're facing unfunded liabilities in hundreds of millions of dollars to deal with, and these are unfunded mandates, to deal with nutrients, to deal with ammonia, to deal with, and in the future we're looking at things like endocrine disruptors. These are, my employers are largely public entities, be they MS4 holders or the wastewater industry, and speaking mainly for the wastewater industry. But those costs are passed on to taxpayers, which then affects businesses. It is our fiduciary duty to try to reduce this pollution in the most cost-effective way that we can. This clearly is much, much cheaper to do than just about any other kind of pollution reduction that we can look at. And I'm thinking chloride is the other one. That's the one where we can actually find that we can save money. And of course, Judy Crane's work in Minnesota would suggest that we can also save money there, because a lot of the cost with coal tar sealants comes at the back end when you have to start getting rid of sediment from detention ponds that is now going to be in a different classification. It's going to have to be handled differently, which radically raises the cost. And I hear this argument a lot about these costs being passed on, but there's a lot of items out there that are going to be passed on to businesses and taxpayers that are questionable and do not have good cost-benefit analysis behind them. This, in my opinion, is certainly not one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I say reducing cost, there's the short-term ones, which often can propel the decision maker to act on it. But then there's the externalized or long-term ones, which are borne not only by the public but by private. I mean, there are private owners of stormwater catchment structures who will be facing this issue as well, both for maintenance and at property transfer time. So yeah, I think that if you look at the full cost picture, it's a good investment. And from a prevention standpoint, again, as we talked about with the outreach to the applicators and the training efforts and so on, we try to bring the provider community along on the journey to get on the front edge of it, to become trained in the alternatives and their best, most effective application and so on. So we are trying to develop the business, the opportunity there, and many, the early adopters are the ones we usually are working with, and